As Bronwyn said, my presentation this morning will talk through the impacts of digitalisation on the system of building, and then Amanda will go through with a really tangible example for you of where we're making progress in that regard. So the slide in front of you is about some extracts from the Building 4.0 CRC research initiative. So Building 4.0 identifies the view that the building industry can improve efficiency, effectiveness and product. That may not be entirely surprising to many people in the industry, but it has collaborative projects looking at each of the threads to see how we can do that and work up some options. It's a really complete framework, so I've used that as a thread through my presentation to talk about what are some of the current examples linked back to that where there are changes happening. I'll touch on how digital disruption typically progresses, and you'll get to see comparisons with where the building industry is and where we might go in the near future. What changes will that impact on the system of building work? So that's not the construction itself, but our control points through the building system. And then tying it back to our audience, the building surveyors, and tying back to the VBA, what work we're doing to actually respond to those changes in the industry. So prefabrication's had proponents in the construction industry for quite some time, and the opportunities, I think, and the issues are well known by the industry. A step on from that is prefabrication with additive manufacturing, which is also known as 3D printing. So I think people will have seen a fair bit about that overseas and to some extent even local companies engaging in that. So New Story, I think, a company in South America who are up to 2,700 homes now. They target community housing, so obviously the look and finish of the buildings is consistent with that market. However, X-Tree in France are actually doing fairly luxurious homes, and they're printing not just homes, but they're also moving into bespoke building environment elements, so like a 40-metre pedestrian bridge. And if you look at their products that we couldn't do previously with traditional methods of building and fabrication and formwork. The USA is also involved, so they have a home printed in New York, Long Island. They list that as $300,000 US. So again, these are products that are fairly commodity that are going to get some attention. Australia, not to be left out, we have fast brick robotics, and people have probably seen those in the local media. Their current benchmark is about 200 blocks per hour laid straight from a CAD drawing through a truck-mounted robot arm. Now this has benefits because the New Story printing actually uses two rails down either side of the structures, which has a fair bit of work to actually pre-configure the site, whereas New Story can actually pull up a truck, settle it, it's got a stabilised arm and lay blocks. So I tell you all this because there's implications, and I guess it's not really just one vendor in one country or one activity. There's a whole range of these things happening, suggesting that there is a more systemic change starting to come through the industry in terms of how construction happens, and then that will affect potentially the system of construction. So does the control point in the building process change to the CAD drawings, which are fed into the fast block robotics arm? Do construction tolerances change? Does that affect the building industry or the surveyors? Do the material suppliers have a more significant role in terms of certifying the products that go into these machines? Probably the best analogy I can give you is in healthcare, they certify not only the medical practitioners, but also the products through the Therapeutic Goods Association, and they certify the process, being the hospital in which the healthcare is conducted. So there's probably a good precedent there for us to look at as a construction industry, that healthcare has done that to have complete control over the process to improve its quality. Disruptions tend to have an uptake in an S-curve. So I think we can see there's a number of examples I've just given that suggest that there's already work happening, but certainly it's not the bulk of building. Whereas the S-curve shows that there's always early adopters and then a mass adoption starts. So when that happens, we the control of the building industry, have to be ready for that. And maybe a good example of that is Apple and Microsoft had a few goes at getting tablet computers right. I know we all see iPads and we're fairly familiar, but Apple had a Newton prior to that, and Microsoft certainly had plenty of goes. So I think we're probably seeing the early part of the S-curve now with construction changes. So what is catalysing change? Change needs a reason. It's not just change for the sake of change. It needs a why. McKinsey in Singapore published an excellent paper in 2016 titled "Imagining Construction's Digital Future," a fairly short paper, about 14 pages, comparing 22 industries on 10 criteria. Perhaps unkindly, they showed construction as the second least digitised industry. And they identified 5 ideas in that, and they talked through what they believe could improve it. And McKinsey, again in 2017, actually, through another paper, Productivity Improvement Opportunities, called out that they felt there was a 50 to 60% opportunity to improve efficiency in the building industry. So these are pretty big numbers, and they create a why. Why would we change? One analyst alone, I guess, doesn't constitute a major change, but the Committee for Economic Development in Australia also have gone in recent years to talk about labour productivity in the overall Australian market. So they talk about 30% improvement over 25 years in general, but then they loop back and they show that construction has only improved about 5% in labour productivity. So that again suggests that other industries digitising may present templates for opportunities that we can grab. Just before I finish that thread though, the why, or what is catalysing change, I do want to call out a counter view. McKinsey in the same papers have identified that healthcare is the 4th least digitised industry. And if you read the media at all, you'll be familiar that most governments have had a go at improving healthcare and digitising it over years, and that's still a work in progress. So what creates major disruptions in industries? There's 2 things. There's a whole range of things, but I'll call out 2 here: commoditisation and data. So commoditisation is a catalyst for disruption in that innovation by definition is when you take an existing capability and use it in a different way. So invention is different. Invention requires creating new things, but innovation happens fast. Invention takes time. So where there's commoditisation, there's innovation, leads to industry change. So the 2 images up there are quite unrelated, but they talk about commoditisation. So the first one is a user feedback on the Apple App Store, talking about the LiDAR application in the iPhone 12. So I think in the construction industry, we're familiar with LiDAR. And it was one of McKinsey's 5 ideas that they called out about improving the construction industry. It was a subset of one of their ideas. So the iPhone 12 now has LiDAR capability built into a product which you might see in school children's hands with only a few years. So it's going to be a fairly commodity capability. And you can see on that particular user feedback that person that discovered this and discovered the way that they could use it, they innovated using that application, and they had a fairly good experience for that. So that's going to impact what we can do in the construction industry with these sorts of commoditizations. The graphic on the right is actually Spot from Boston Dynamics. So he's a robot dog. There's another company, React Robotics, who specialise in robots for construction. But Spot's probably better known because there's YouTube videos circulating of Spot doing parkour, Spot dancing, and a whole range of other things. So Spot's currently $80,000 US, which probably wouldn't be held out as commodity. But Hyundai has just bought a controlling stake in Boston Dynamics. Now, Hyundai have 2 things: capital and ability to execute. So I think we could anticipate commoditisation may not be too far off in that particular case. So that's commoditisation of products. That's just 2 examples. There's many opportunities. What these 2 do, though, is they create data. So Spot's being used in manufacturing in Ford motor plants, and it goes around collecting data about changes in the plant. And the LiDAR, again, is just a way of collecting data. So on a construction site, if you analyse it, you get visible light and you get the LiDAR image of a 3D granular image of what was happening on that particular point that you captured. So all that data can drive other changes downstream of the initial commoditisation and disruption. The Australian Financial Review this year ran an article about the increasing importance of data in construction. And it was focused on a particular vendor, but you can see that the data available to practitioners in the industry is going to go up pretty quickly. And that creates opportunities for decision support, record keeping to defend decisions, and a whole range of other options. So pulling all this back to our audience, a building surveyor, I think we would generally agree that digitalisation will most likely change the system of building, and this will present opportunities to building surveyors. So the last bit is my take on it, perhaps. So it may change how you do your work. So that is the process of approvals and certification, because systems increasingly using workflows, different data sources, They're automating, so that means you get really consistent processes in the way you evaluate buildings. Rules engines are really good because they create a really consistent product. Watching the engineering industry in recent years when they adopted CAD computing, they continued to use the same duration and labour resource on work, but what they did was they created a lot more rigour around the end products. So I think what we could anticipate is that digital skills are going to become important for our building surveyor cohort. So I won't go too much further than that, and I'll leave that in Andrew's capable hands. Another point that I want to raise is the system of building may change. So I talked a bit about the healthcare example where not just practitioners and products are certified, but also the process is certified. So in the case where a CAD file is being uploaded to Fast Brick Robotics, does the CAD file get certified or does the robot machine get certified? How do we deal with that? What is the role of building surveyors in certifying control systems? In the healthcare industry, they use the equivalent of building certifiers to go through and recertify particular practices in hospitals. So is there a broadening of the role? Is that something the building surveyor community wish to engage in? The last part I want to call out there for the building surveyors is data. So as the data increases, it actually gives the industry an option to have more granular risk assessments. So that is, we can risk profile practitioners or products or systems. Lower risk or more defined risk actually reduces the ambiguity for the indemnification process, which is insurance. And I understand there's a fair bit of dialogue going on about the insurance processes at the moment. So that could be unfavourable or favourable depending on how you want to look at it, but we can see that is happening. Risk industries or the insurance industry is already getting more precise with its risk assessments in other industries, and we inevitably will follow in that direction. Then on to the last party in this presentation, the VBA. So consistent with the 5 slides I just talked through, we are digitalising, and that is the way we engage with practitioners, the way we look at the system of building, and the way that we assess risk. So at a very simplistic level, more functions need to be offered online and remotely, and we're very mindful of that. So Amanda will talk through in the next presentation, remote video inspections and the way the VBA has piloted that, and that is the uptake around that and the way it works. The way we present forms online, we're mindful, we've done some pilot work around that, and we're actually looking to present more forms online, and that obviously has a benefit for building practitioners, because if we get the right data up front, we can turn around applications and approvals much more quickly. It also means for the building practitioners, they've got access to 24/7 ways of engaging with the VBA. We're also putting exams online. We've piloted that, and we're looking for an initial rollout in coming weeks. So the image that you can see up there for the plan-based exercise is one of those exams that we now have digitised, and we can run through an online process. The last part there is that I probably want to call out in the way we engage with the practitioner community is BAMS, and we're mindful that we need to improve the administrative processes, including reminders, automated emails and the like. So we actually have established a BAMS continuous improvement program, and we'll take feedback from a range of sources to start prioritising work to tune that up. In the future, we'll look at a digital proof of ID. We're well progressed in the planning around that and the supply piece. We've now got a number of months to build that out carefully and test it. We'll have a single digital login. Having multiple digital logins is difficult to administer for everyone, so we'll actually go through and align that with the Victorian government, and a digital licence card. I have proposed to Andrew that building surveyors would make an excellent pilot cohort, but we'll see how that works out with our processes once we've completed testing. We're also consolidating data, which will show through open data and registers for the building participants, so not just practitioners, but also the community. And we're collaborating with other jurisdictions and agencies around, do we create archives for construction documentation, as well as recommendation 12 in the building confidence report? How do we interact with building information management systems? How do we create digital twins and allow those to be used by building practitioners? So that's a fair level of content to throw at you in 15 minutes. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present. And hopefully that presents some ideas for you to contemplate in the future for the profession.